The ASUS G703 gaming laptop is a thick and powerful machine, featuring some serious specs, making it a good desktop replacement. In this review, I'll cover pretty much everything, including overclocking, gaming performance, thermals, and more, to help you decide if it's worth buying for the price. Let's start with the specs. For the CPU, I've got the Intel i9-8950HK GTX 1080 graphics, and 64GB of memory running in dual channel. There are three 512GB M.2 NVMe SSDs in a RAID 0 array, along with a 2TB SSHD. It's also got a 17.3-inch 1080p 144Hz screen and gigabit Ethernet, Wi-Fi version 5, and Bluetooth version 5. The lid has a brushed silver finish and appears to be plastic, with a bronze plastic finish on the back. The interior is a black rubberized material, and all edges were smooth with no sharp corners. The dimensions of the laptop are 42.5cm in width, 31.9cm in depth, and about 5.1cm in height, so fairly large. Not too surprising considering the specs, however this is larger than the more powerful 9900K laptop I recently covered. The weight of the laptop is listed at 4.7 kilos, which is about what I found mine to weigh. My scales only go up to 5 kilos though, so I've measured the two power bricks separately, and this adds another 1.4 kilos. So all up, we're dealing with over 6 kilos or 13 pounds. As mentioned, the screen is 17.3 inches, although it's only available with a 1080p resolution. Given the powerful hardware inside, it may have been better paired with a 1440p screen. But as a desktop replacement, perhaps they're assuming you'll be attaching a larger monitor anyway. The IPS level screen has a 144Hz refresh rate and a 3ms grey-to-grey response time, along with Nvidia's G-Sync. I've measured the current color gamut using the Spider 5 Pro, and my results returned 97% of sRGB, 68% of NTSC, and 74% of Adobe RGB, so decent results for a gaming laptop. At 100% brightness, I measured the panel at 308 nits in the center, and with a 840:1 contrast ratio, so about average brightness for a gaming laptop. I've taken a long exposure photo in a dark room as a worst case backlight bleed test, and there was some minor bleed here, although I never actually noticed this during normal use, though this will vary between laptop and panel. There was minimal screen flex, as it's fairly thick, along with fairly large hinges out towards the corners which also help with stability. As a result of the heavy weight, there's no problems at all opening it up with one finger. Most of the weight is up towards the back due to the cooling, but it was stable using it on my lap, though not really ideal due to the weight. Above the display in the center is the camera. The 720p camera looks pretty bad, but the microphone sounds alright, although it does pick up some of its own fan noise even at idle. I found the chiclet keyboard good to type with. It's got 2.3mm of key travel, and I didn't have any problems using it. It's got per-key RGB backlighting, which can be controlled through the Aura software, and there are a few built-in effects. Here's how typing on the keyboard sounds to give you an idea of what to expect. Above the keyboard towards the left, there are dedicated buttons for volume, microphone mute, Aura software for customizing lighting, buttons to open XSplit, and the ROG Gaming Center software, which lets you monitor the system. There was almost no keyboard flex at all, even while pushing down hard. It was extremely solid. The touchpad was smooth to the touch and uses precision drivers. The touchpad itself doesn't click down, but it's got physically separate left and right click buttons, though I did have trouble using the left click sometimes. I'm not sure if that was just my review unit, otherwise it worked well. Fingerprints and dirt show up easily on the interior, but as a smooth surface, they're easy to wipe off. On the left, there's an air exhaust vent, gigabit Ethernet port, USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C port with Thunderbolt 3 support, USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-A port, and 3.5mm headphone and microphone jacks. On the right, there's a full-sized SD card slot, two more USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-A ports, air exhaust vent, and Kensington lock right at the back. On the back, there are two large air exhaust vents towards the corners, along with the two power inputs, mini DisplayPort 1.4 and HDMI 2.0 outputs. The front is plastic, with the speakers towards the front left and right corners. There's also a couple more underneath the screen on the left and right sides. Overall, I thought they sounded very good for a laptop. Clear at high volumes, and they can get quite loud. There was some nice bass too. Speaking of sounds, by default it's also got this sound that plays on boot, like many other ASUS laptops. Thankfully, you can disable this, either through the ROG Gaming Center or BIOS. On the back of the brushed silver lid, there's an ASUS logo towards the side with RGB lighting. I wasn't able to customize it, but it did change to match my keyboard effect. Underneath, there's not actually that many air vents. The first panel can be removed by simply removing one screw with a Phillips head screwdriver, and this provides access to the 3 M.2 slots, the single 2.5-inch drive bay, and 2 of the 4 memory slots. By removing the rest of the panel, we get access to the Wi-Fi card and battery. The other 2 memory slots are on the other side of the motherboard. Powering the laptop is a 71 watt-hour battery, and with a full charge and just watching YouTube videos, with the screen on half brightness, keyboard lighting off, and background apps disabled, I was able to use it for 2 hours and 16 minutes. Not great, but not unexpected considering the powerful hardware, and the fact that it was using the GTX 1080 graphics the whole time. No Nvidia Optimus here. However, the newer RTX model does have that option of swapping to Intel graphics to save power. While playing The Witcher 3 with medium settings and Nvidia's battery boost set to 30 FPS, the battery lasted for 48 minutes, and the frame rate didn't drop at any point. The 2 power bricks are meant to be 280 watts each, however one of mine was 260. But you only really need that much power if you're gaming. You can get by just browsing the web with one. Thermal testing was completed with an ambient room temperature of 25 degrees Celsius, so expect different temperatures in different environments. Also keep in mind there are heat pipes shared between processor and graphics, so a change in one component may affect the other. I've tested with both balanced and overboost modes. Balanced mode is basically with stock settings, while overboost mode would max out the fans and overclock the graphics by 100 MHz on the core. It was also overclocked to 4.8 GHz on all cores out of the box, up from the default 4.3 GHz all-core turbo speed of the i9-8950HK. Starting at the bottom of the graph, at idle the temperatures were fairly warm, although the fan was almost silent. The gaming tests were done with Watch Dogs 2, as I find it to use a good combination of CPU and GPU. Going from balanced to overboost mode, we can see a 6-degree improvement on both the processor and graphics as this boosts the fan speed. With the power limit of the CPU boosted from the stock 45 watts and undervolted by -0.1 volts, we were seeing much hotter temperatures, mainly on the CPU, but we'll see how performance improved in terms of clock speed in the next graph. The stress tests were done by running AIDA64 and the Heaven benchmark at the same time, in order to attempt to fully utilize both the processor and graphics. The lowest most stress test result at stock was power limit throttling at the 45 watt TDP, but also had occasional thermal throttling at 94 degrees Celsius. Once overboost mode is enabled and we boost the power limits, the CPU was constantly thermal throttling at 98 degrees Celsius when under these high levels of load, even with the fans maxed out or -0.1 volt undervolt applied. At the top of the graph, I've added the Thermaltake Massive 20 cooling pad, which didn't really help with the temperatures. These are the average clock speeds for the same tests just shown. Up the top, we can see that with the cooling pad in use, we do get the best performance. Although the CPU was still thermal throttling, it was throttling less due to the extra cooling, getting 200 MHz higher CPU clock speeds on all 6 cores. This is actually quite impressive. Yes, it's running hot, but this is also very nice performance for a laptop. The 8950HK has an all-core turbo speed of 4.3 GHz on all 6 cores, so to be able to go beyond this even under this worst-case stress test is a decent result. Otherwise, in general, we can see higher clock speeds with overboost mode enabled, as this increases the fan speed, which addresses the thermal throttling that was taking place in most tests. These are the clock speeds I got while just running CPU-only stress tests without any GPU load, and we're seeing higher clock speeds now as there's less heat in the system without the graphics contributing. With the undervolt applied, it was possible to get 4 GHz on all 6 cores under stress test. Not bad considering your typical 8750H tops out at 3.9 GHz. By boosting the power limit and undervolting together, it was possible to reach 4.6 GHz on all 6 cores. Not bad at all. Here are the temperatures for the same tests. We can see that as soon as we boost the default 45 watt TDP, we're running into thermal throttling at 98 degrees Celsius, even under a CPU-only workload. But as we saw, we are getting some nice performance. To demonstrate how this translates into performance, I've got some Cinebench CPU benchmarks here, with the i7-8750H down the bottom for comparison. The single core result with the i9 doesn't change, as we only see throttling under multi-core stress test. Power limit throttling prior to boosting the power limit, followed by thermal throttling with the power limit increased. Here are the GPU-only clock speeds while under a graphical-only stress test, and with a 150 MHz core overclock applied, on average there was a 140 MHz improvement under this workload. With the overclock applied, the temperature rose a couple of degrees, and I never saw any thermal throttling on the graphics. But we'll see how this helped improve gaming performance a bit later. As for the external temperatures where you'll actually be putting your hands, at idle it was in the low 30s. While gaming and under stress test, it got to the mid 40s in the center. Honestly, not too bad considering the temperatures inside. although we can see a fair bit of hot air coming out from the right directly under your mouse hand if you're right-handed. As for the fan noise produced by the laptop, I'll let you have a listen to some of these tests. At idle, it was fairly quiet, but still audible. While gaming and under stress test, with balanced mode it was about the same as most other gaming laptops I've tested. And then with overboost mode enabled, it was very loud. Finally, let's take a look at some gaming benchmarks. I've tested these games with overboost mode enabled, so the fan was maxed out and the graphics had a slight overclock. Additionally, the CPU was also overclocked to 4.8 GHz on all cores out of the box. However, without manually boosting the power limit or applying undervolting, as we saw before, this won't actually help much. Battlefield 5 was tested in campaign mode and not in multiplayer mode, as it's easier to consistently reproduce the test run. Even with ultra settings, I was able to average almost 100 FPS and above 60 for the 1% low. It was running perfectly fine. Fortnite was tested with the replay feature, and even with epic settings, I was able to average above 150 FPS and well over 100 FPS for the 1% low. So it was running very nicely with absolutely no issues at all. Not surprising, as this is a well-optimized game. It was a similar deal with Overwatch, which was tested playing in the practice range. Low, medium, and high settings were basically constantly hitting the frame cap of 300, and even maxed out at epic settings, almost 200 FPS averages were possible. Shadow of the Tomb Raider was tested with the built-in benchmark, and this test was getting very high results for a laptop. Around 150 FPS averages with lowest settings, and just under 90 even with highest settings. PUBG was tested using the replay feature, and once again, very nice frame rates, even for this somewhat suboptimally optimized game, with over 100 FPS possible in this test with ultra settings, and over 130 possible with medium settings or below. CSGO was tested using the Electrical FPS benchmark, and with all settings maxed out, the test was still getting almost 300 FPS. With just under 400 possible with all settings at minimum and a 1% low above 100 FPS. Again, very nice results for a laptop. Rainbow Six Siege was tested with the built-in benchmark, and given this runs well on lower-end hardware, it's no surprise to see that even with ultra settings, the 1% low is near the 144Hz refresh rate of the screen, with over 200 FPS averages. Far Cry 5 was also tested with the built-in benchmark, and the results were very nice for this test, with over 100 FPS averages possible at ultra settings, and up to 130 with low settings, if for some reason that's not enough for you. Assassin's Creed Odyssey was another that was tested with the built-in benchmark, and I found it playable even with ultra settings, as you don't need a super high frame rate for this one, although higher was definitely possible with lower settings. Watch Dogs 2 is a demanding game, but it doesn't need a high frame rate to play. I can play it just fine with a solid 30 FPS. But even ultra settings were averaging over 70 FPS, with 50 for the 1% low, so no problems at all here with max settings. The Witcher 3 played very nicely, even with ultra settings. Despite the 50 FPS 1% low, the 100 average still felt smooth enough, though of course better results are possible with lower settings. I've tested some more games in the dedicated gaming benchmark video. Check the card in the top right if you're after more. As expected, these crazy specs are giving us very nice results in games. Really high frame rates at 1080p, and from other tests I've done, I'd expect the same from 1440p too. There is a newer version of the G703 with RTX 2080 graphics as well. Check the card in the top right if you want to see how the laptop 2080 compares with the GTX 1080. Now for the benchmarking tools. I've tested Heaven, Valley, and Superposition from Unigine, as well as Firestrike, TimeSpy, and VRMark from 3DMark. Just pause the video if you want a detailed look at these results. As we saw earlier, we've got the option of overclocking the graphics and CPU, and boosting the power limit and undervolting the CPU to increase performance. So let's see how this actually helps in gaming. Far Cry 5 was retested using the built-in benchmark at 1080p, with the manual overclocks shown by the purple bars. There was a fair improvement to the 1% low in all but ultra settings with the manual settings, up to 10% with low settings for instance, and then a 3.6% improvement to average FPS at ultra. There's not too much of a difference as we're only running at 1080p, and the stock results already have some overclocks applied due to the nature of overboost mode, but we can get a small boost with the manual tweaks. I've used Crystal Diskmark to test the storage. The 3 M.2 NVMe drives in a RAID 0 array are getting crazy high performance. I don't think I've ever had results like this in a laptop before. The 2TB 5400 RPM SSHD is performing about as expected, while the SD slot is performing very well, almost able to max out my card. For updated pricing, check the links in the description, as prices will change over time. In the US, it seems to go for around $2,700 but with half the memory and less storage. While here in Australia, it goes for around 5,000 Australian dollars. Again, for half the memory and less storage, so it's definitely not cheap. Not too surprising considering the specs for a desktop replacement machine. So what do you guys think about the ASUS G703 gaming laptop? It's definitely not for everyone. At this size and weight, it's more of a desktop replacement, especially considering the high-end specs inside. As a result of all that power, the battery life isn't great, as I expected. And 2 power bricks are needed, further reducing portability. It also gets fairly hot if we start boosting the CPU performance. However, the performance we're able to get is quite impressive. It should be capable of playing any current game with high settings at 1080p and 1440p no problem. Let me know what you guys thought about the ASUS G703 gaming laptop down in the comments. And leave a like to let me know if you found the review useful. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for future tech videos like this one.